Hello, this is the Journal Club podcast. I'm Mariah or Mo. I am a sociology student at New College of Florida, and here we are, at July 15th, 2020, and we're going to be presenting some articles today and talking about stuff. If anyone wants to introduce themselves, they can. Keisha, would you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikisha Georges. I am going to the State College of Florida, Manatee/Sarasota, and how would I say this? I'm getting my AA in nursing, maybe? Yeah. Nursing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I guess, Olympia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I would love to. So my name is Olympia. I'm an MHI Scholar. I've been an MHI for the past 2 years, and I work primarily with the data team. I just received my bachelor's in computer science from New College of Florida in May, and I'm planning on going to law school at some point within the next 12 months, hopefully. So yeah, that's me. Yeah, very exciting, very fun.
Awesome. So, do you want to start, Keisha, or do you want me to start with the article? It's up to you.
You can start, maybe.
Okay, I'll start. So my article, let me bring up my little fact sheet. My article is about the title is Attitudes and Behavior of Physical Activity in Children, Finding from the Play, Lifestyle, and Activity in Youth Play Questions. This article was written around January 24th of 2022, and it basically talks about the health of children and physical activity, which is really, really important. And me and Dr. Merritt were talking about it, I think like a week ago, about how kids don't really go outside anymore, and we are like shifting to very sedentary. Help me out here. I can't pronounce.
Sedentary. You're good.
Sedentary. Sedentary lifestyles.
Excellent.
Woo! And I want to discuss like what the article said. And so the study found that like the play questionnaire investigated the 4 like identified domains of like physical literacy, in like childhood physical activity, and like including knowledge and understanding, like daily behavior and motivation. And the research, like its aim was to like quantify like physical activity in children, but it also like investigated the parent and child perceptions of surrounding like the various domains of physical literacy. Like, do you have are there like rules about like bedtime or like electronics? And the article states that, not states, but like it discusses that limited that the data has been like shown that more kids aren't going outside as much, and the recommended like activity for children is 60 minutes a day, and most children aren't even getting that. The article states that international data of physical activity from 1.6 million students has shown only 20% of adolescents are sufficiently active, which that's not a great number, because physical activity in children shows that they're more motivated, they're less like mental health issues in children who are more active, and you get more motivation. I think Dr. Merritt was telling me, I love this, because Dr. Merritt was telling me last week that like, yeah, back in our day we just worked and we worked out our issues like physically, and we put in the work, and we fueled all of our energy into like our physical work. And now like social media and phones and stuff are becoming more of like a mainstream with like children and even like young teens. It's becoming more and more of a problem because we're seeing a lot more mental health issues in teens and children. We're seeing more health issues related to not being physically active. And one thing to point out from this research is that notably research investigating perceptions, they also like studied perceptions of like physical activity. Like notably research investigated perceptions surrounding physical activity has shown both parents and children overestimate physical activity habits. Children were found to be more accurate and physical habits are less accurate in children. So it's basically saying that parents tend to view their children getting more physical activity than they think they are, which is important. Because every parent thinks, yeah, my child goes outside, but in reality, they're not getting the exercise that they need, which is an hour every day. So I think this article really highlights the importance of like just physical activity. It doesn't have to be playing soccer or playing football. It can just be like going on a walk, like for like 30 minutes, or just like playing frisbee, or just doing something that is like active. And when we go on our phones, or like when we're like in our beds just scrolling through, that's all of our mind is like focusing, and we're just constantly just worrying about things that don't actually matter. I mean, not that like social media doesn't actually matter, but it's not real. Any discussions, any questions, any comments? I haven't read the chat here. Okay, sorry, Dr. Merritt. The authors. I was trying to say the authors. I totally forgot. Several people.
It's all right. Let's just start over.
Sorry. The article, the authors that wrote this were several. So Andreas Stracaloni, Laura Berbert, Eric Nohely, Rebecca Zinkwer, Eddie Wheeler, Dai Sugimoto, Gregory D. Meyer, and Avery D. Fangenbau. So those are the authors. And this article comes from, I'm trying to see, I think it comes from the magazine PM&R. I think Dr. Merritt can have some insight on that. I don't know that journal specifically. Oh, sorry. American Academy of Physical Medicine or Rehabilitation. Sorry, that's the article. So any comments or questions? Anything else?
I'm just curious if the people who are younger on this podcast noticed some of those things, or maybe some of those things as they were growing up, if you felt like that was a situation you ran into, maybe not getting enough exercise.
I definitely felt that as a kid. I think primarily because the types of exercise or physical activity that were available to me were not the ones that I was interested in.
Yeah.
Like there's a very severe lack of variety, I think, in physical education programs nowadays, where there's a very limited type of physical activity that you are expected to engage in. And not every kid likes doing that. Not every kid likes being forced to run a mile. Like that's not, like for a lot of kids, that's not an engaging form of physical activity where they feel like they're actually having fun. It just feels bad. Yeah. So I think a lot of this has to do with the outlets that we're giving to children for physical activity. Are those really the best outlets, or should we maybe provide more diverse solutions? Oh, and Onyx, the article that I shared, I remember seeing something about this a while ago, and I just looked it up really quick to see if I could find something. And this report that I linked is from the CDC, talks about the rate of type 2 diabetes diagnoses among people under the age of 20 for the past like 15 years. And it has increased. the rate of newly diagnosed children under the age of 20 with type 2 diabetes has increased by almost 5% every year, which is pretty insane. It's pretty remarkable. And it's also even more interesting when you look, I just was looking at this, their demographic breakdown. And here it says for type 2 diabetes, incidence during the period increased in all age, sex, and race ethnicity groups, with the exception of non-Hispanic whites, which is very, very interesting because there are some other things that we've talked about how type 2 diabetes can actually be influenced by where you live. There are higher rates of type 2 diabetes among very urban communities, particularly communities that are right next to highways. Yeah, and also communities that are in food deserts, there are much higher rates of type 2 diabetes, particularly among children. And so it's very interesting that their overall research found of the past 15 years that the increase was the same among all groups except non-Hispanic whites. That's very fascinating to me because I think it sort of indicates a level of discrimination that is happening, or a level of, you know, what is the right word for this? A level of sensitivity, perhaps, or a level of conditions being poorer for other groups in comparison to non-Hispanic whites. So I just thought that was really interesting. Yeah.
There's also a genetic component to
Yes.
diabetes. It tends to run in families.
Yes.
And there's also a consideration of the whole influence of what's called the microbiome, and certainly dietary. But it's really activity. It's a disorder of muscle metabolism.
Mm-hmm.
With sufficient physical activity, not only is it about keeping weight down, but it's the way insulin works in the body and uptake with muscle, like doing large muscle group activity, you
Mm-hmm.
burn through the sugar. So it also ties to the huge history of sugar in this country,
Yes.
and how sugar drove the economy, drove the slave trade, drives so many addictions. Because when you look at the affinity for sugar in the brain and what it does to the brain versus opiates or cocaine or other things, I mean, and even in animals, the animals will go after the sugar.
Yeah.
It's like
It's
this
pretty
wiring. It's this incredible wiring to get this thing. And so the way that your body manages sugar, of course, is insulin. It's a hormone that helps drive it into the cells and improves metabolism. And so it's a complicated thing. But what's really, really concerning when you see this rise in diabetes and inactivity is that this is the first generation. Your generation is the first generation of children who have a lower life expectancy than their parents in this country.
Yeah.
Let's try to digest that for a minute.
That's very scary.
So this is not just theory and, you know, lecturing, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. Because we've had this major lifestyle shift in our country, in our practice of living,
Mhm.
and this intrusion of so much processed, quick food, high fat, high carbohydrate, feeding and just like flooding those receptors with all of this sweet, colored, non-nutritive stuff that people think that is, you know, what you eat. And we have this huge epidemic of obesity, and you couple that with basically, you know, logging people down onto computers and devices to function. You know, you can't function without a computer with a phone. And nowadays you can't do school, you can't do work, you can't, you know, order food. I mean, you got to have a thing to take the picture of the QR code. And I mean, everything requires devices. So you're not using those large muscle groups. You're not using your brain in different ways. I mean, your brain consumes a lot of energy. It certainly consumes more energy if you're reading a book and formulating ideas and images in your mind of what's happening versus sitting there, you know, playing, shooting things on a video game, passive stuff. You not have to have the problem solve, really, it's different. So I think that this is good that you guys are talking about this and with your friends, because I also see a full circle where young people are more intrigued with starting to cook, starting to realize how you actually save money when you buy your own stuff versus how much it costs, especially with the supply chain challenges we're having right now.
I've started to get a lot more interested.
Yeah. So
Now
what
that
kind
I
of
have to
things
buy
have you cooked
groceries for
recently?
myself. Yeah. It's
Yeah?
become very it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy what buying like just the most basic fundamentals at the grocery store costs right now. I went to the
Right.
grocery store to get like bread, sugar, milk, and like 3 other things that I needed that are like basic essentials, and it ended up being $50. I mean, it's just insane.
So you can leave off the sugar next time.
Yeah, that was for my coffee. That's the mistake. That's the one place where I still use sugar is in my coffee.
Stevia. You can use the
Yeah,
stevia,
the stevia. Yeah.
the monk fruit, stevia. There's other sources of sweeteners, or just learn to take it black, straight.
Yeah.
You know, that's the way a lot of people do that too. Great. Well, that was an incredible discussion. And Mariah, you did good, different words, language, but you know, that physical medicine and rehabilitation is a specialty that really studies function and activity and looks at muscle activity and how that ties to disability and these things. So what was also interesting was that I thought the kids liked it. When they asked the kids about what was their favorite class? Gym. I mean, they liked doing stuff. They like being in their bodies. It makes me so sad that they have restricted physical activity in school so much when that's really, you know, what connects kids with school is it's fun to play the games. And when I was in New York last time, there was a bunch of kids out in the park and they were playing double dutch. I was like, oh man, I used to be so good at double dutch. And they let me turn 10, 20, 30, 40, you know, and be in it. And it was so kind because I was really not with it anymore. They let me try and, you know, I could get in, but I was just not moving fast enough anymore to get a full on jump. But we used to do it for hours. And it's very cardiovascularly intense to double dutch. You're not jumping one rope, you're jumping 2 ropes coming at you. And you had to watch the turners, and everybody gets a turn. It teaches so many different things versus off to the side with one thing. So, Keisha, what'd you think about it?
Hello.
You're muted.
Yeah, Keisha, you're muted right now.
Yeah, I think it was a great article. It is pretty sad, honestly. Like, you know, what Dr. Merritt said, that, you know, we have a shorter life expectancy than, you know, our parents, which is really sad. Because then it's kind of like, when we have children, like, how bad is it going to be if we don't try to change, you know, what we eat, you know, our addictions, because, you know, sweets are addicting. So, yeah, I like how they're doing, you know, this research and everything, you know, getting back to the youth. And, you know, I like how, you know, you look on TikTok, like you see like, you know, people buying more healthier foods, you know, they're planning out what they're going to eat for the day that's like healthy, or what they're going to eat for the week, you know, they're planning on Sundays, what they're going to eat for the week that are healthy. So I do kind of see like a change in where we're heading, and where we were headed. So, yeah.
So now if Keisha, you wanted to move into your article really quick.
Yes. Okay, so
We have a rare double feature on Journal Club today. Sorry, I just wanted to pretend that so that people know, like, they're not confused.
So should I share my screen, or?
Sure, if you
If
want.
you have
Hold on a
something to
second.
present, sure.
Let's see if it works.
Is somebody watching for Daja if they managed to get on?
I think you should be able to. Hold on. Yeah, you should be able to share now.
Okay. So it's giving me some trouble. So is it okay if I just read it? Because it's my MacBooks.
Yeah, of course. That's fine.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
All right.
Remember, please could you start with stating the name of the article, the authors, when it was published, and what journal it's in?
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. um, so today I'll be reading the researchers study a new way to treat sickle cell disease. And this is under National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And this is by Sway Lee, then MBDSC, a senior investigator in chief of the company's cell sickle cell branch. So what is sickle cell disease? Sickle cell disease is an inherited blood condition that occurs when the body produces an abnormal hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a protein in which red blood cells help deliver oxygen to different tissues in the organ throughout the body. But however, in sickle cell disease, the abnormal hemoglobin forms fibers under low oxygen conditions, changing the red blood cells from normal donut-shaped discs to abnormal shape, including crescent-shaped moons. Why is it important to study new ways to treat sickle cell disease? It's for people living with sickle cell disease, acute pain. It's so severe called a crisis. Sickle cell blood cells are also highly fragile and have a short lifespan. So they believe that reducing sickling should also improve anemia, as red blood cells will be less likely to break down. So what are the researchers studying for a new treatment option for sickle cell disease pain? When we look at genes involved in sickle cell, we found that children and adults hospitalized for sickle cell were most likely to have variations in the gene PKLR. This gene expresses the production of the enzyme percuriate kinase. Is that how you say it, Dr. Mir? Percuriate kinase, I think it is.
Can you spell it, please?
It is PYRUVATE, and then
Pyruvate kinase.
okay, there you go. In
We
red
learned
blood.
that in biochemistry.
This discovery led us to study how treatments that simulate the PKR activity may prevent or alleviate severe pain crises. So what are their next steps for the clinical research? Their next steps is when they conducted an early phase 1 clinical research trial, they found that activating PKR in patients with sickle cell disease through an oral therapy, which is safe and tolerated. So they will continue to access long-term safety and efficiency of approach with more research. So they assessed how repurposing a drug developed for treating PKR deficiency may help people with sickle cell disease. And then get next. Yes, so another question is, how may these insights into PKLRS anti-sickling properties inform other areas in research? There could be multiple ways to migrate, mitigate, okay.
In other words, to kind of keep it from happening, to stop it from starting the whole cascade.
So, for example, other molecules involved in cellular health and in energy production could activate PKR and produce similar anti-sickling properties. So the treatments that are currently available for people with sickle cell who experience a pain crisis, current treatments are Dr. Mary, you're gonna have to help me. Hydro,
Hydroxyurea.
yes. Cryzanulip.
I have to see that one, sorry.
I know. So all these will aim to reduce the frequency of painful crises, but they do not alleviate the pain, which requires strong painkillers. As they
And then
continue,
now, if I could just take a minute, remember everyone, you should have your notebooks or your individual chartings. This is an opportunity to add to your vocabulary list that you should be keeping. So Keisha's really challenging us. You'll be champions on the next Scrabble game and the next word Scrabble. You're doing great, Keisha. Finish up.
They continue to work with William A. Eaton, MD, PhD, and Bruce J. Tomberg, PhD, and his team at the National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering to explore optional techniques to monitor effects of new sickle cell disease treatments on vascular health, which will help us access the effectiveness of these treatments for patients with sickle cell disease.
Fantastic. That was a very dense article with a lot of new terminology.
Yeah.
And you just have to start where you are. And you did great, Keisha. It's going to be, you're just starting college. And one of the things that trying to read something like this shows you is that you're going to be learning an entirely other language that will be English. But the language of science and medicine is an entire other language. So it's not just the subject, it's that you have to learn the words that convey the concepts of those subjects. And over time, it'll all start to make sense and fit together. The beautiful thing about what you talk about here is how much more we understand about sickle cell, because it's really, it's interesting, this bioengineering, right?
Yeah.
Because they're looking at the cell structure, why does the structure of the cell change? Why do you have a nice little fat donut plumpy cells that you can capture oxygen in these iron, complexes, which is what hemoglobin, heme for iron, globin, it's a protein, it's like an iron protein complex, and carry it around and nourish the body. Red blood cells are like Santa Claus. They help bring nice nourishing things and nourish the tissues and help bring oxygen, and it's happy. So then why do they get sad? And why do they get spindly and ugly and sticky and sickled up? And then when they do that, and that structure, it's a deformation of the structure, then they can't nicely glide through, especially those small blood vessels and those capillaries, and they get stuck and they make a log jam, and then they can't deliver the oxygen to their tissues. And when that happens, you have something called ischemia, ISCHEMIA, ischemia. And ischemia, or ischemic change, is the lack of blood supply and oxygen to an area. When you have that happen to the heart, you can have a heart attack, because that's what ischemic is, meaning there's not enough blood supply. If it's not going to the brain, you can have a stroke because it's not enough blood supply and oxygen. So that's what's really hard with sickle cell, because it starts, when somebody has full sickle cell disease, meaning the full, both sides of their genome from both the mother and the father who had the trait and or sickle cell, they then inherited that and they have the full sickle cell gene, means that they can go into crises where the cells will sickle, often triggered in times when there's low oxygen, or if they're sick, if they have infections, a lot of stress, things like that. And when the cells sickle up like that and they block up like that and there's no blood supply, that's extremely painful, super painful. You ever had your blood drawn or had your blood pressure done, and the tourniquet around your arm, just those few minutes of cutting off the blood supply, it starts getting really uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Imagine for hours this thing blocking off like this to the abdomen, to a limb, and causing an infarct in the bone. So these children really can suffer. And unfortunately, once again, in terms of disparities, many times they're not taken seriously. Many times their pain is minimized. And there's a trauma that goes along with the crises that can occur. So the treatment model is to try to with the hydroxyurea, it kind of helps plump up the cells. It kind of helps prevent them from doing the sickling thing and keeping it nourished and preventing the crises if possible. And this is again a disease that is not just in Black children, although it's predominantly in children of color, because it affects people from what areas of the world? You guys? Does anybody know, like, what areas of the world?
I believe it's, oh, I don't want to say something wrong and then look like a dumbass.
Never in Journal Club, no such thing, Olympia.
I feel like I remember when I was learning about this initially that it was like Central Africa, or maybe along the coasts. I'm not 100% certain.
Well, what was the code? This is the whole evolutionary process of humans and environments, is my hint. There's an environmental trigger that permitted survival of people with trait to pass this on. And that survival mechanism is that people whose blood cells aren't fully nourishing aren't the most great receptors for bloodborne diseases like malaria.
I forgot about that. I knew it had something to do with another blood transmissible disease, and I couldn't remember which one it was. Now I'm so
there you go. So malaria. Okay, so there's a protective factor for people that live in endemic areas of malaria. Now, it's not just Africa, it's the Mediterranean basin. So, and there's other subvariants and cousins like thalassemias and things like that. So, in which humans evolved, you know, this amazing biology and evolution work together because humans evolved ways to kind of contend with these things. And people from Greece and Italy and other countries like that also can have this disorder and pass it on to their kids. So it's important to understand that as clinicians when we are presented with these kind of cases. And then genetic counseling is also important because many people don't even know what their status is. They've never been tested. So it's important to be tested if there's a history of somebody with sickle cell in the family. What we started to see happen during the COVID crisis, again, something else to learn with COVID, the wonders of COVID, is that because of the low oxygen tension caused by the COVID infection, especially in the really bad cases, and of course increased susceptibility, people who were with sickle cell trait and certainly sicklers had a harder time because they had less oxygen carrying capacity. So we had to account for that. Okay, and sometimes they need transfusions and things like that because when you go into a real crisis and the cells start bursting up and it's just a mess. So I'm not sure if our guest has arrived or is going to make it. Did Daje make it in this time? Or?
No, not. I haven't gotten a response.
Probably because they didn't get the answer to their previous. They said they would be available, but you know, let's just see. I can text him. But any other comments on this whole thing? You know, have any of you had friends or do you know of anyone with sickle cell?
I did know someone actually. I knew someone in high school who had sickle cell, and I recall that there were many weeks of school that he missed, and that it was very painful and very scary for him. And I recall at one point he sort of was very was very scared and was essentially telling us like, I think I'm gonna die. Wow. And it was so frightening for us. Luckily, of course, that did not happen. Thank God, because he did get proper medical care, but it was very scary. It was someone that I was friends with for a long time in high school. But yeah, I don't know if anybody else would like to.
So, I mean, as a young person facing and knowing somebody like that, it's pretty shifts your perspective on things, right? When you have something in your body that you don't have any control over.
Definitely. Yeah, it was very scary. And at that point, I didn't even really know, at that point, I did not really know what sickle cell was until he had told me about it. I think I was in like my sophomore or junior year of high school or something like that. And I really had no idea what it was until he had explained it to me. And I just remember being very worried for him, particularly when he was missing school, because nobody really knew what was going on. Nobody knew if he was okay. But yeah, it definitely shifts your perspective about it being very serious and not, just something to be treated lightly, for sure.
All right. And then the whole idea of genetic counseling.
Yeah.
So you have a couple, they love one another, they want to have a family, they want to get together. Neither of them knows what their status is. So we know from genetics that if both of them are carrying sickle cell trait, there's a 1 in 4 chance that one of their children could have sickle cell.
Mhm.
Or they have a child, and then they find out the child has sickle cell. Then they're faced with the reality, do they want to attempt another pregnancy or not? Weighing these things out, I mean, it's not like you should let that define anything, but these are just difficult, personal, ethical decisions and choices that have to be considered. And that's part of why the importance of genetics and genetic counseling and people, understanding different ramifications to try to make the most informed decisions that they can between themselves and their doctors is important.
Right.
Okay.
I'm actually, Dr. Merritt, I'm actually curious about the whole genetic counseling thing, because I was sort of under the impression that it's kind of difficult to get your hands on. Not difficult in the sense that there's no one who does it, but difficult in that it can be rather expensive. Or insurance may not cover it, or depending on where you're trying to get it. Would you say that that's accurate, or does it depend?
Well, I think that's a good question. And I think it definitely, like everything, depends.
Mm-hmm.
It all starts and begins, first of all, usually with insurance. But I think at most academic or university affiliated programs where they also have research going on, they
Right.
do have a service, and they have genetics and genetics counseling and genetics
Right, yeah.
analysis as part of that. And I think you would all be surprised and interested to know that Dr. Wayne Fredericks, the president of Howard University and the general surgeon, is a sickle cell survivor.
Wow. That's very
Right.
impressive.
Yeah. You talk about a stressful job. So it's like nothing, and that should be held out for people to understand as an example when considering these things, that it's a matter of getting access and getting the best care and taking the best care and making the best decisions. Oh, yay, Dajay made it.
Woo.
Love that very Joe Cool picture.
That is a